With the price of Bitcoin having risen substantially over the last few months, I've been getting quite a few requests to make a video sharing my thoughts on whether it's too late for new investors, or investors who don't own very much crypto, to buy Bitcoin. And by the way, the first point which I want to make is that Bitcoin, like any other asset class or investment, does carry a degree of risk, and it would be foolish to ignore this risk. And of course, the best way to reduce risk is to educate ourselves and learn as much as we can, avoiding mistakes and employing better investment strategy. So the first thing which I wanted to talk about is what a situation where it's too late to buy Bitcoin as an investment would look like in my view. I mean, considering that we are trying to figure out whether it's too late, I think that by inverting the problem and first of all trying to determine what actually is too late, we can then answer our initial question far better than would otherwise be the case. Also, before we get any further, if you're not yet subscribed to our channel, remember that by subscribing and turning on bell notifications, you are automatically entered into our monthly crypto giveaways. Anyway, in my view, a situation where I would consider it to be too late to buy Bitcoin as an investment would be a point of saturation in terms of mainstream adoption, when everybody or almost everybody who would likely be interested in owning Bitcoin as a store of value or as a currency or for any other purpose has already been familiarized with Bitcoin, and at this point I would say that okay, from an investment perspective, as the number of potential new Bitcoin users has been exhausted, the total level of demand is probably as high as it's ever going to get, and so the potential for price appreciation would at this point be very small. But of course, that is not yet the case. In fact, although it's impossible to know how many people really know about and understand Bitcoin, I think that it's safe to say that there are more potential users than actual users so far. And from a long-term investment perspective, for this reason, I think that there is still massive potential for growth in the adoption and value of Bitcoin. And this ties quite nicely into my second point, which is that the value of Bitcoin in my view lies in the value of the Bitcoin network and the brand value and believability. And I think that the average person massively underestimates the value of a brand. Just think about the US dollar. The US dollar is effectively the global reserve currency and is certainly trusted by many individuals and countries as well. In fact, national governments around the world own trillions worth of dollar-denominated debt, which means that they believe that not only is the US dollar worth owning, but it's even worth lending for terms of 5, 10, or even 30 years at interest rates of a couple %. And when you own debt which is denominated in any particular currency, in this case the US dollar, you are effectively betting that the real rate of inflation, not necessarily the rates that the government issue through the Consumer Price Index, unless you believe those rates to be accurate, but the actual debasing of the money supply through printing of new money and the subsequent loss of purchasing power which inevitably follows, that debasing is going to be lower than the rate of interest which you are receiving. And so with trillions worth of debt denominated in dollars and owned by governments around the world, clearly people quite literally have trillions of dollars worth of faith in the US dollar. And yet the dollar holds no technological nor tangible underlying value. It's not backed by gold, which is a very useful commodity in the manufacturing of computer components, and also in dentistry and of course in the jewelry industry as well. It's also not backed by any revolutionary technological value either. And so the US dollar's value relies almost entirely upon the faith which people place in the currency, and that is the power of a brand. And so when Bitcoin is regarded with the same level of near-universal trust as the dollar, and pretty much everybody who wants to or would want to is using Bitcoin, then I'll say that from an investment perspective it's too late to buy Bitcoin. But until then, I for one think that there is still room for growth. And you know, it's almost certain that people investing today won't get the same percentage returns as the people who bought at $50 or $100 and have held on through thick and thin. And of course, that's because it's far easier for an asset to double or quadruple in value from a low basis of $100 than from a much higher basis of $40,000. But in my mind, the question is not whether I'm likely to get as good a return as any other investor. To me, it's about alternatives, and with the stock market indexes like the S&P 500 yielding a few percent and interest rates on savings earning even less, I for one think that Bitcoin and certain other cryptos are still highly attractive in the long term. And the reason I say long term is because even though I believe in the long term prospects and I think that they are going to be good, in the short term, as in every other asset market, Bitcoin moves in price cycles, and sometimes it becomes heavily overvalued in the short term, and at other times heavily undervalued in the short term, which is why I think that just buying at any random point isn't usually a good strategy. But that's a topic for a whole nother video. If you enjoyed this analysis and would like to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching.